The second is Surah Muhammad. The third is Surah Al-Fath. The fourth is Surah Al-Hujurat. The fifth is Surah Qaf. And the sixth is Surah Al-Dhariyat. Three of these surahs are Meccan surahs. They were revealed with respect to events that occurred within the Meccan period. And three of them are Medinan surahs. They were revealed with regards to events that occurred in the Medinan period. Surah Al-Ahqaf, it takes its name from the places that the people of Ad would live in. And these were often referred to as the dunes. So a large portion of this surah is dedicated to narrating the story of the people of Ad in thorough detail. Which prophet was sent to the people of Ad? Anybody remember? Anybody remember? Yes, Prophet Hud alayhi salam. So this story is covered in quite some depth, and Allah sheds some light on the type of rejection the people of Ad displayed towards the messenger who was sent to them with the divine message. Allah then goes on to speak about the nature of the signs within creation. The heavens, the earth, alternation of night and day, to stress on the God who's deserved of all worship and loyalty and subservience. Then the final theme of this chapter is loyalty towards parents. Allah puts forth a very moving piece of information that your mother bore you with great difficulty and pain while undergoing so much weakness. And this was for months upon end. And then Allah goes on to say, even after the mother gives birth to the child, she has to suckle that child for a certain number of months. Meaning the troubles and the difficulties and the sacrifices don't come to an end after the birth of the child. Rather, when the child is born, the child becomes completely dependent on the mother. And the mother has to then suckle the child for a certain period of time, which means the mother is now bound by the child. The mother is now dedicated to serving this child, nourishing this child, loving and caring for this child, indicating to us that we should have a high level of dutifulness towards our parents. And Allah then also makes mention of a certain dua that He advises people to recite, which is that, "Oh Allah, give me the ability to thank you for all the blessings that you have given me." This is the end of Surah Al-Ahqaf, which is a Meccan surah. The themes within this surah that we've just spoken of are very Meccan orientated. We mentioned towards the beginning of the sessions, the beginning of the month of Ramadan, that what are the themes of a Meccan surah? Can anyone remember? How do we know if a surah is Meccan or Madinan? There are certain patterns we look for. Does anyone remember? Anyone remember? So, monotheism, a chapter that speaks about the oneness of God and how He's deserved of worship. A chapter that speaks about the afterlife, hellfire, paradise. A chapter that speaks about morals, interactions, etiquettes, mannerisms. These are all the signs of a chapter being Meccan. Whereas Medinan chapters have a completely different theme. Medinan chapters revolve more around rulings, laws, guidelines, isolated cases. So this is how we distinguish between a Medinan and a Meccan chapter. The next surah is Surah Muhammad. And this is named after the Prophet Muhammad himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And before we explore the reason behind this name that's given to this surah, it's also known by another name. Anyone know what that name is? A very famous name. And the reason why it's known by the second name is because this surah was revealed shortly before the first ever battle that took place throughout the course of Islamic history, the Battle of Badr. So it's a Medinan chapter. It was known as Surah Al-Qital, the chapter of fighting. And the main and underlying theme of this chapter is discussing the finer details, the rules and the regulations with respect to combat and warfare. So Allah teaches the companions who were now on completely different territory that you have the legal right to defend yourselves and engage in defensive warfare against those who are making preemptive attacks against you, i.e. the Meccan pagan Arabs who attacked the believing people due to mere assumptions and allegations. Allah's telling them that you can fight against them. You can kill if it's in the process of defending your honor, your children, your families, your wealth. And there are a series of rulings that Allah makes mention of to do with warfare. Another theme discussed in this chapter is Allah tells us some of the outcomes of those who nourish Iman properly. That when you become a true believing person, there are certain outcomes that are secured for you. Number one, Allah forgives your sins. Number two, Allah rectifies your personal and public affairs. Number three, Allah makes your feet very steadfast and grounded when it comes to dealing with test and trial and tragedy. And last but not least, Allah enters you into paradise. And these are all the outcomes of nourishing organic Iman. And that's what's mentioned. And it's very interesting that Allah makes a link between organic Iman and fighting in His cause. Because warfare is something we don't shy away from. It's an instrumental part of our faith. Jihad is something Muslims took part in for the course of centuries. This is a huge part of our history. And Allah links this to having organic Iman, having firm belief in Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next chapter is Surah Al-Fath. Surah Al-Fath literally translates to the conquest or the victory. And this surah was revealed shortly after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which occurred in the 6th year after Hijrah. And the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was something that was interpreted to be seemingly wrong and bad for the believing people. So many of the companions who were evicted from Mecca and then immigrated to Medina, they left behind their families, their wives, they left behind their assets, they left behind the businesses that they invested in, and they moved to a different land in pursuit of religious betterment, in pursuit of better well-being. And during 6 years after, they had the opportunity to go back to perform the pilgrimage. And the Prophet ﷺ had a dream, and he saw himself performing the pilgrimage with his companions. And when they went back to Mecca, they found that the Meccans were not accepting of the Muslims coming back to those lands and performing pilgrimage. So they refused the Muslims. And a lot of the companions felt demeaned and degraded, that we are huge in number, we've established ourselves significantly in comparison to what position we were in when we left Mecca. Why can't we fight them? Why can't we rebel against them? Why are we conforming to their commands? Why are they behaving as if they're more superior to us? To such a degree that Umar ibn al-Khattab said, are we not the people of truth and they're the people of falsehood of Rasulullah? And Prophet said, yes. He said, so why are we shying away from them? So this is something that was seemingly wrong and harmful for the believing people. But Allah Azza wa Jal reveals these verses post-Hudaybiyah, teaching the Muslims that choose your battles wisely. It's not worth having a small victory at the cost of a major setback. Teaching the Muslims that if you're patient, Allah will give you a greater victory in close time. And literally within 2 years, the Muslims conquered Mecca completely without a single drop of blood being shed. And this is when the famous conquest of Mecca took place in the year 8th after Hijrah. So Hudaybiyah is dedicated to speaking about all the incidents that were related to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which is a peace treaty that was formed between the Meccans and the Muslims of Medina. But they breached this treaty shortly after, which resulted in the Muslims forcing their way to Mecca and conquering that particular land. And this was a huge victory. Allah starts off the surah by saying, this is a huge victory we're announcing for you. And Allah is giving you victory to forgive your sins. And Allah praises the believing people and informs them of many unknown treasures and rewards that are going to befall them if they exercise patience and they trust in His divine plan subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next surah after Al-Fath is Hujurat. Hujurat is a Medinan chapter. And this chapter was revealed towards the end of the Prophet's life sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was revealed as a result of spying, slander, and false fake news being spread in Medina with respect to a certain tribe who had newly accepted Islam. Allah sent down these verses as a source of morality and ethics, social morality and ethics for the Muslim people of Medina. So this chapter is dedicated to teaching the believing people basic mannerisms concerning their interpersonal dealings. How should you speak to the Prophet, peace be upon him? How should you deal with your fellow brethren? If fake news comes to you, are you supposed to verify that news, or just entertain the news without seeking any clarity whatsoever. When it comes to name calling, it comes to backbiting, it comes to slandering, it comes to mocking your believing brother in Islam, what's the Islamic standpoint? So all of these bad character traits are prohibited categorically within Surah Al-Hujurat. And it's often referred to as a chapter of adab, the chapter of etiquettes and social interactions. And that's the underlying theme within this surah. The next one is Surah Qaf. Surah Qaf is a chapter that fundamentally revolves around the afterlife. Everything is to do with the akhirah. And it's the only surah in the Qur'an that begins with the letter Qaf. That's what makes it distinctively different from all other surahs in the Qur'an. Allah starts off by talking about the crops, agriculture, harvest, all the blessings He's bestowed upon human beings in abundance. He's given them many mediums for them to seek their sustenance in this world. Then Allah speaks about the day of judgment and the hereafter in intricate detail for the remainder of the surah. One of the things that He mentions is He's closer to the human being than his jugular vein. And this is a very famous verse that's often quoted in Islamic talks and lectures, that Allah knows our smallest, most discreet thoughts. Allah knows our internal musings. Allah knows our inclinations and our leanings without us even elucidating them. Allah then goes on to speak about that there are two angels writing down your deeds, writing down your actions. And this is spoken of in quite some depth. Allah talks about how He is the one who does not oppress His servants and slaves. Rather, He's a just person. And on the day of judgment, He will take account. He will take the non-believers to account for the oppression that they committed. Allah talks about also a very petrifying verse, a verse that instills fear and consciousness in our hearts. Allah talks about Jahannam, how it's a beast that's being fed, and the more it's fed, the more it has a thirst for more human beings to devour. Allah will ask Jahannam on the day of judgment, are you satisfied? And Jahannam will say, Hal min mazid, that are there any more people that I can devour? Allah's created Jahannam purely to torture and torment those people who lived a displeasing life to their Creator. And that's another lesson that we learn. And then Allah goes on to speak about some of the events that will occur, the accountability, and also the weighing of the actions of the children of Adam. The next surah and the last surah is Surah Al-Dhariyat. Al-Dhariyat literally refers to scattering winds. So Allah often takes an oath by majestic things among His creation. You'll find in the Qur'an the sun is sometimes something Allah refers to as an oath that He takes. Allah often takes an oath by the moon, by the pen, by the night, by the stars. And these are forms of creation Allah takes oaths by because of their majesticness that's very well known to us in the worldly life. So it's only befitting for the majestic Almighty to take an oath by something that's of similar majesty in terms of its creation and formation. So Allah starts off by taking an oath by the winds. He then moves on once again to speaking about the story of some of the prophets like Ibrahim, when the angels came to Ibrahim alayhi salam, and He talks about the affairs of the hereafter. Then towards the middle portion of this surah, which is the last thing that's covered in just 26, Allah speaks about the qualities of the righteous people and those who came before us in particular. And Allah mentions they would only sleep a small portion of the night. Rather, even their sleep would be inconsistent because they spent the entire night in worship. And Allah makes mention of the time of suhoor in particular. وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ, that during the time of suhoor, they would dedicate that time to ask for forgiveness from their Lord. And these are among the qualities that rendered those particular people successful and prosperous in their worldly and their akhiri pursuits. What are the lessons we learn from Juz 26? The first lesson we learn is in the day and age we're living in, we often look at our parents as they're something inferior at times. The more technology advances and the more we have access to knowledge and information, everything's at our fingertips, we often look at our parents as if they are ignorant. They have less knowledge, as if they're less seasoned than we are. And here Allah's giving us a stark confronting message that honor your parents. Be dutiful towards your parents. And we all fall short towards our parents in some way or form. But Allah is reminding us that paradise is sought through them, particularly the mother. What the mother does for the child pre and post birth, the child can never repay the mother for that. There's one incident where a man came to Umar al-Khattab and said, I've carried my mother on my back to Mecca. I've made pilgrimage with her on my back, done all the tawaf while carrying her. Have I paid her back? He said, not even a contraction's worth. Not even a contraction's worth. We can never repay back our parents. And this is something that's often shadowed living in a Western liberal society where the value of parents is completely belittled. Parents mean nothing. They value their dogs more than they value their parents. And living in a Western society, undergoing a Western educational system, we often are influenced by these British values. It's crucial that we really tap into the etiquettes and morals that our religion and our culture inculcates in us. And that's to value our parents, to look after them, to put their needs before our own. The next lesson that we learn is that Allah knows all our thoughts. Allah knows all our pains. Allah knows all our agonies. It's very easy to feel alone and marginalized in this world. When going through difficulty, when going through mental health issues, when going through financial troubles, when going through a divorce, when going through marital mishappenings, it's easy to feel you have no support, you have no shoulder to lean on, you have nobody to confide in. But Allah is reminding us He's closer to His slave than His jugular vein. Allah is always going to be beside us. Allah is always going to be the one who's allowing us to confide in Him. So much so, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that when a slave raises his hands out of sincerity, Allah is shy to return that slave's dua empty-handed. I.e., Allah will always respond to that slave. And there's one famous instance that I always find very heartwarming that occurred during the time of the companions, where they were in the amidst warfare. Arrows are being exchanged, casualties are laying on the ground. People are fighting, blood is being shed. And there's a woman who's unaware that she's now stepped into a battlefield and she's suckling her child, just focused on her baby and suckling that child because he has a pressing need for milk. And the companions, they stop the war and they look at this woman. Now, why is she endangering her child? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَتَعْجَبُونَ مِنْ أَمْرِهَا هَذَا? That are you shocked by the affair of this woman? That she's completely oblivious to warfare and killing and casualties and focused on her child? They said, yes, Ya Rasulullah. And he said, I swear by the one in whose hand lies my soul, the love Allah has for each and every one of you, it supersedes the love that this woman has for a child. Allahu Akbar. And this teaches us nobody cares for us and loves us and wants good for us more than Allah Azza wa Jal. And the moment we nourish this sentiment and we accept this sentiment and we make it the focal point in our lives, that's when we'll truly taste the sweetness of Iman. When Allah will become everything, our lives become Allah-centric. And the last and final lesson, which we mentioned again and again, is to be conscious of our actions in this world. The angels are documenting every deed that we carry out. Whether it's looking at the opposite gender in a lustful manner, whether it's watching something on YouTube we shouldn't be watching in privacy, whether it's using bad language when nobody else is in the room. All of these actions that no human being has acquaintance with, Allah will bring to light on the Day of Judgment. Even an atom's worth of good will be brought to light, and an atom's worth of bad will also be brought to light. So we're being reminded, be conscious of everything you do. Be conscious of everything your tongue utters, everything your hands busy themselves with, everything your legs take steps towards. Monitor yourself rigorously. Remember, you're going to meet Allah. And through embodying and employing these qualities, a believer develops the most supreme quality, the quality of taqwa, which is the ultimate purpose of Ramadan. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to engage in self-betterment in the month of Ramadan, the month that transforms people, the month that gives everyone golden opportunity to change the course of their life. And we ask Allah to make us of those whose sins are forgiven in this noble month. And we ask Allah to make us of those who, when they exit this month, their relationship with the Qur'an is more refined, it's more seasoned. They have more of a connection with His book. وأقول قولي